Hello. Can you see me? Can anyone hear me out there? Well, looks like we're on. All right. So it looks like we've got some people on. Anyways, oh, there we go. Adino the Esnite. All right. Hello, everyone. For those of you who are here, trying to see where it shows me how many people are viewing, but I guess I've got to look at the other one to make that out. At the YouTube. Okay, so we've got 9 people in here so far. So as usual, guys, I'm gonna just, for those of you who got here early, welcome aboard. But I'm gonna wait a few minutes before we introduce our guest and everything, because usually it takes about 10 minutes or so for people to start coming in enough numbers. But I see some people there. Adino, Driving in Dragons, Judd Goswick, welcome. Glad to see you here. Oh, geez, just started to rain where I am.
It's raining here too.
Judd Goswick asks, while we wait, what's next on the Pundit Files? Well, oh, oops, dropped it there. So the latest Pundit File was the high-tech ruins, right? And the next one is going to be, let me just see, because I don't remember in what order I wrote these things. So, all right, so the next one is going to be Medieval Warzone Random Encounters. So it's going to be a source book that is going to be a series of different types of random encounter tables that you will have in the middle of a battle, early medieval or late medieval. So there's going to be like 2 different tables for that. And then there's also a table for a more medieval fantastical battle, like if you're fighting against in a battle where there are magical beings and creatures of fairy in large amounts. And then finally, there's going to be a section for traveling encounters in an area that is war-torn, right? And that's I think it's a pretty good book. I think you guys are going to like that. And for those of you who are like the earliest people here, the first people, I will also tell you, but don't tell anyone yet, my next one after that is a very special one. It's going to be number 33, and it is called the Combat Wheelbarrow Maze. Okay, so it is a dungeon, a particularly weird type of dungeon that is obviously going to be doing a bit of mockery of the combat wheelchair. Not so much about the barrow maze, but just when I saw wheelbarrow, I had to add maze, so there's a barrow maze, right? But it doesn't really, it's not really inspired by barrow maze. it's just a name. And it is it's actually a really good dungeon in a way, because it does a dungeon adventure that is totally different in the form of this kind of contest that people are in. And of course you have to have combat wheelbarrows, right? And so there's mechanics on creating and using combat wheelbarrows in it. So you guys are gonna really enjoy that one, I think. The funny thing is it's definitely not like a kind of anti-woke parody or something like that, right? Like it actually does bring up the combat wheelchair at the very beginning. It does a kind of a little joke. Like the joke of it all is on the introduction. Then after that, it's a dungeon, but it's a very strange dungeon that is going to be very challenging for the party because you can't all be at the same place and stuff like that. And of course, everybody's got the combat wheelbarrows. So
will it have specific mechanics? Will the wheelbarrow have specific mechanics to utilize? Or
well, there are some mechanics because of the rules of the contest, right? So you're going to have like you have the one person has got to be behind driving the wheelbarrow, and then there's a passenger in the wheelbarrow, right? And the wheelbarrow will have there are different models of combat wheelbarrows, right? They'll have a variety of different selections in terms of how defended it is, how fast it can be, or how or how much offensive weaponry it carries. So it's kind of like a race, like a wacky races game, but inside a dungeon. I think it's really good. So, but we'll see. That's not coming out for another like 5 or 6 weeks yet. But when you see it, I think people will like it, and it's got a method of generating this dungeon that will make it not completely different, but it'll always be every single time that you create it. It's different in terms of the locations and the varieties of the challenges and things that there are in it, right? So it means that because it's meant to be like an annual contest that happens every year, the combat wheelbarrow maze appears once a year, and there are 8 teams of contestants that are allowed to go in, and then after that vanishes into a pocket plane for the rest of the year. And every time it appears, it's a little bit different.
So you'll be generating from random tables to get the yeah.
So and the way that the generation works is that there are more options than there are positions where things get generated in. So sure. It's always going to be a little different.
Yep.
All right. So what time is it now? It's 10:07. We'll give it a few more minutes. I don't know what we're up to now. Last time I checked, we were okay. We're 17 now. It's getting there. It's getting there, but it should get bigger than this.
I'm not a huge draw pundit,
I don't know if that matters. It's funny because my last video, the one where John Delarose was supposed to come and right. he didn't make it. He canceled at the last minute. That one was bigger than the one I did with Rob Alderman, who did, Gods of the Forbidden North, Yep. Now, of course, yeah, Sandy Peterson got the most views, I think, so far of anyone.
Sure.
But there doesn't seem to, like, when Alexander Macris did and Mr. Welch both did kind of high, like those are like big name, those type of guys are big name celebrities.
Well, yeah, Mr. Welch. Huge. So.
Ling Chu, who's a guy that has a YouTube channel. At the time, he only had 2 videos on it, right? And he had like I think 25 subscribers,
right?
And he's still got 770 views, right? So that's only a little less than Rob Alderman.
Yep.
So I think people like to watch the show, and I think my idea of having a show where some episodes I try to get really big names or really well-known people in the the OSR.
Yep.
And then in some shows I want to get people that maybe are not that well known yet, but that I would like to see them be better known. So that's how we do it.
Well, today is actually also the High Holy Day, right? So it's May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day, May the 4th, which could be literally. I changed my plans to be here because I had plans for the 4th every year. I still love Star Wars, even though Disney sort of just destroyed my childhood and everything that it stood for. But I still have a love for Star Wars. And so it's a big day. May the 4th is a huge day for the Star Wars community. So still, even
I tell you what, we can talk about it a little bit further into the interview so that we can make it one of the post introductory topics.
For sure.
And see what we whether we agree or disagree about things about Star Wars. Now, I do like Star Wars a lot, especially the original trilogy, because I'm a myth and legends guy, and it follows the monomyth and all that. So
it absolutely does. Yeah, it absolutely does. It is the hero's journey, right? At least it was until, again, Disney destroyed it, gutted it, and kind of just made me very sad. But it was the hero's journey. It was myth, right? And it is no longer. So, but that doesn't mean that the original trilogy doesn't still deserve respect. So,
yes, it absolutely does deserve respect, undoubtedly. All right, we're up to 25 people now, so I think it's about time. It's now 10:11, so I'm gonna get started. So this is the official beginning of the live stream. Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords, and this is the RPG Pundit Encounter. And today I have as my guest somebody that most of you may not know, actually, because he does have a YouTube channel, but right now I don't remember exactly, but he's only got like a few hundred subscribers. But I came upon his channel and was very impressed, and so I wanted to have him on board, and we're going to be because his channel is a channel that does reviews essentially of different, not necessarily new, sometimes older and sometimes new D&D products and OSR products. I wanted to have him on because, frankly, there are a lot of people that do reviews on YouTube, right, and reviews about RPGs, but in my opinion, there's a lot of them that are pretty poor, right? So then, first of all, you have like the guys that are total shills that you don't know if they're getting payola or whatever, and you don't know, or if they're just simps for whatever Wizards of the Coast or whatever other company it is. And then there's also people who are just they're just not good at doing reviews. That they have a lack of sufficient historical context or experience in like game design or a variety of game experiences. Like they don't have enough critical mass of past experience or past knowledge to be able to do a review that I think is worthwhile. And there's also some people that may have that, but don't really have a very effective stage presence, so to say. Right now, I'm happy to say my guest tonight, Rollstats, at least that's the name of your channel. I'm not sure if you want me to address you as Rollstats or if you want if you want me to call you something else. But he is a guy that has a channel where he goes deep into different RPG products, including some like classic modules and some new things. And he's usually does it in a very insightful way. And I think you're going to agree that he has a very good radio voice, right? I don't really have a great radio voice, but I guess I'm saved by the fact that I came from the same place as Jordan Peterson, and so I sound a little like him. But in Rollstats' case, it sounds like he's a radio announcer. He's got a really good sound to make it catchy for paying attention to what he's saying in the review, right? All right, so Rollstats, welcome to the RPG Pundit Encounter.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, sir. I've been watching your channel for quite a long time, and Lion and Dragon, and I'm not just saying this to sort of suck up to the host, but Lion and Dragon is actually one of my favorite systems, and I play it regularly. Although I will say, I'm going to say right off the bat, I have a hard time getting my home group to buy into the magic, right? But I certainly take many elements from Lion and Dragon and I implement it into my game. To be completely honest, I don't run any straight set of rules. I kind of run this mishmash of rules that I care for and that my table cares for, and we mash it all together, and that's what. Well,
that's totally in the spirit of the OSR, right?
For sure.
Like one of the things I tried to do when I made Lion and Dragon and my other RPGs with the magic system, it is not the Vancian magic, and that's good.
Yep.
Because not just because if you play like Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire totally straight, then you're doing it in the medieval authentic way. But because the way that I did set it up as this kind of ritual magic means that you could take any of the things there and put them into a D&D game. And this isn't the spells that you memorize. This is ritual magic that is different, right? And then you can just plug it right in, right? So it allows for that OSR compatibility.
Well, 100%. Well, 100% agreed. I think that anyone who plays Lion and Dragon straight is probably more of a simulationist than I am, right? So I'm not necessarily a simulationist, although I can see the appeal to that. I am not that hardcore, right? That starts to become work when you really begin to get into the simulation route and go down that path. This is too much work for me as a DM, right? Not necessarily as a player. I think players enjoy a lot of simulation in their game. As a DM, it gets to be a lot of work, right? And we all have lives. We're not 12 anymore, and so we can't spend 12 hours a day just thinking about gaming. And so the time that you have, you want to make sure it's the most as impactful as you can. And I just don't have the time to go the simulation route. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate a sense of realism in my game, right? Like everyone wants that verisimilitude. Everyone wants it to be believable. And I think things like the Old School Companion, things like Lion and Dragon allow a DM to quickly and easily insert realism and verisimilitude into the game and make it appealing to the players just enough without becoming, work. Right? Or real work. So
it's essentially like the Coles Notes. You remember the Coles? I don't know if that was what they called it in the US. In Canada, it was Coles Notes, where you get the key most important parts of a bigger book, and it summarizes it, and so students would use that for writing essays and stuff like that.
So
that's kind of what I think is Lion and Dragon and Baptism of Fire, right? Because it creates this concentrated version of the most essential things that even if a DM knows nothing about the time period or whatever, you just put that in, and it's going to be enough that it's going to feel much more real than if you didn't have it, right?
Yep, 100%.
I don't know if the simulation requires that much work, though, because I mean, all it needs is a 5-year degree and about 20 years of research. And that's my experience,
That's my point. So here in the U.S., we had Cliff's Notes, right? And so anyone who went through higher education within the U.S., they probably owe their Cliff's Notes, right? That's pretty much how it worked here. So yeah,
sure. It's the same thing. All right, so we're gonna get started with the actual interview now.
Yep.
Because in my interview format, I always start out, there's a question I always start with, and then there's another one at the end that I always end with.
For sure.
And so the first question, I'm not sure if you're going to have if this is going to be all that relevant to you, but it's tradition. So who in the industry and the hobby has been good to you and who has been bad to you?
So when you ask that, and I'm just going to ask for clarification, are you talking about game developers, game creators, game designers, or are you, because that would not be relevant to me at all, are you talking about YouTubers, dungeon tubers? Like what? Give me some context to that question.
It is kind of an open question because I'm really hoping that at some point someone will be like, oh, that son of a bitch Venger Satanis ruined my life, or whoever. I used Venger as an example, but whoever, right? And then it'll just start out this thing that'll become viral, But sure. Yeah, it's basically the idea. It's mostly meant, obviously, for guys that are maybe with more design side and with experience, like Alexander Macris. Okay, who was good to you and who was bad to you, right? Like there are definitely people that were good to him in his work, in his design career, in his writing career, in his work as a web editor, and people who were horrible to him, right? But so it's a little bit less relevant to you, but I mean, maybe you've got a beef with some other YouTuber or something that you want to bring up, or maybe there's somebody else who did something really nice to you to help you get ahead,
So here's what I would say, right? I don't necessarily have beef with any YouTubers because I'm not important enough to matter, right? What I mean by that is I don't get involved in sort of the infighting. I don't really have a dog in that race. What I will say is, right, if if I had to say who's been bad to me, you know, within the RPG sort of sphere or vertical, right? And this is going to be old hat, and you know, I'm not necessarily sure, you know, how this is going to go over, but I think it is a crime. I think it is literally a crime what Hasbro has done, right, to Dungeons and Dragons as an IP in the name of ESG, right? This is the thing. It's not even, you know, everyone wants to complain about DEI and blah 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 blah. DEI is a symptom, right? DEI is a symptom of ESG, right? And you know, ESG is affecting the entire world, and it really doesn't. It shouldn't, right? It shouldn't. What I'm saying is, it's a game. It's just a game. Why can't you let people have fun? Like I don't understand. I don't understand why people are not allowed to have fun how they want to have fun. It's so ridiculous to me, and it is literally why my channel exists, right? Like, so let's back up to the beginning. So the way that you started, I agree 100%, right? What I mean is there are a lot of channels that exist that cover RPGs and, you know, D&D specifically, but other RPGs that I'm certainly not going to name any names, and I don't want to use a word like shill, but you know, if the shoe fits. And so what I mean is, it doesn't matter. The quality of a particular product doesn't matter anymore, as long as it follows a specific formula and or format, or, you know, shows the right representation. That's silly. Like that's just silly. The quality of media matters, and whether that's written media or whether that's visual media or whether that's audio media, the media matters, and the quality of that media matters. And what passes for reviews these days are literally commercials, right? Like, and I'm in marketing. Marketing is my day job. I recognize a commercial when I see a commercial. So I break all the rules of YouTube. Literally, quite frankly, I break every single rule. I have hour-long videos. I don't use B-roll. I don't use jump cuts. I don't do TikTok editing. I literally talk about the product, right? Like, it's you.
Same as me, man. That's like kindred spirits.
Right.
Look at that.
It's you and me talking about the product. And so is that a good, you know, strategy? I don't know. I don't care. I create the videos that I want to watch, right? I don't run ads. I don't want to run ads. This isn't my day job. I don't get paid for this. I do this for the love of the game. And so when I speak about products that I love or dislike, right? Or strongly dislike, because of the quality of that particular product. And nobody does that. No, literally, what passes for reviews on YouTube are, I'm going to open the book and I'm going to do a flip through, right? A flip through is not a review. Give me some context. Give me your opinion. Tell me why you think this is good. Tell me why you think this is bad. We may not agree, but at least it lets me know that you have an original thought, that maybe you read the book, that you understand the material, right? Like but you'd be surprised at how rare that is, right? It is very rare for someone to actually state an opinion, because nobody wants to be offended, right? Nobody wants to offend. And
well, especially these days, because you know, when I started, and remember, I started reviewing RPG books in like 2005 on my Zanga blog, right? So like that a thing that doesn't even exist anymore, right? But yep. I was a blogger for a decade and whatever before I became a YouTuber, and I was very, very successful blogger until nobody read blogs anymore, and then I jumped into YouTube. And so I've done a ton of reviews that were written reviews of RPGs in my blogger days, and now I've got, you know, my reviews playlist on my YouTube channel. And where was I going with this? That no, hang on, I've lost my train of thought now. What was I responding to you about? Right. That at the beginning of that time, I had, you know, my reviews are always the same. I look at the good things and I say this is good, and I look at the bad things, I say this is bad, right? And if a game sucks, I'll say it sucks. There were a few games that sucked, but I try not to go to the absolute extremes of like this is completely horrible or something. I always want to say, well, who is this game for, and is there someone who will like it? Once in a while, there's a game that I'm like, no, nobody could possibly like this, right?
Yep.
Or sometimes there's occasionally a game that this is so great that I have nothing bad to say about it. But most of the time, it was something in between, and that was fine for a long time. And it was only after, not even right when I started with YouTube, but a little bit later than that, I think, that I started to have people saying, oh no, your reviews are terrible because you can't criticize, like, what about the poor person who made this product and things like that. Like, and I think I think that's the millennials, or something. It's a mindset that just seems crazy to me. Like, the most important thing that you need to know in a review are what are the weak points of a product, right? Like, otherwise, you're literally just shilling. And the problem is what I finally realized that it was that this was by the time the 5e was at its, was becoming a big fad. And it was that these were people who were relatively new to the hobby that had only ever seen 5e channels of like these 5e, WotC shills, who would only ever give these, effervescent reviews filled with, praise for whatever the newest thing was. So people would buy the newest thing because then, WotC would reward the reviewer, right? And so that was why, right? That was why these people thought that the only thing that reviews are supposed to be is like infomercials for products, and they just couldn't believe that I was saying something bad about a product. It's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. And, a review should be a critique, right? What I mean is when you're reviewing a product and when I'm watching a review, you're absolutely right. I want to know, okay, what are the sticking points on this? What are the things that don't work, at least from your opinion? And then I will obviously formulate my own judgment. But I don't want to hear that that everything is sunshine and roses when it's not, right? Like I don't understand. It's almost cult-like behavior. I don't understand like how people can just consume that content over and over and over again. It is truly cult of personality because you're not getting anything from it. And I honestly, I believe it's sort of the TikTokification of the world, right? It's sound bites and it's jump cuts and it's fancy edits and oh wow, that was a great review, but there was no substance there, right? Like there was no substance there. Where is the opinion? Where is the critique? Where is the sort of the discussion of mechanics or aesthetic or just overall mood and feel of the game? Because all of those things are really important, right? I mean, like, you can take two games that are, and I know you dislike clones, right? I have a different opinion. I happen to think that clones reintroduce the better parts of D&D to a new generation, right? Because like the better parts of D&D are dead. The only place that you're going to find them now is in clones, right? Retro clones.
It's not that I dislike clones. It's that I think there's every clone has been made at this point, right? Because literally a clone is going to be this, like, there's very, very little difference except for a few aesthetic elements or art elements or things like that between, all of the various basic expert clones that exist now, right? And the problem is that a lot of people outside the OSR still think that that's all the OSR ever does, like these are the people that thought Shadow Dark must be this new and super innovative thing because they haven't realized that there's like 1,000 products that are super innovative.
But that's 100% my point. My point is, right, the soul of D&D does not lie with WotC any longer. Shadow Dark, love it or hate it, is the soul of D&D now, right? And I would argue that Lamentations is probably the better BX clone, but Shadow Dark is a BX clone. It's a BX clone with
no, it's not a clone. Let's be very specific about our terminology here, because I am, some people wanted me to be the Pope of the OSR or something like that. So, but I am the guy who came up with the categories that the OSR uses, right? Which is to say, you have the first wave of the OSR, which are the clones, right? Those are games. A clone, to be a clone, you have to be a game that doesn't introduce new elements to either the rules or the genre or something like that, right? So Old School Essentials is a clone, right?
Right.
And
Old
so
School Basic Fantasy is a clone.
Those are games that are meant what they're meant to do is recreate the original rules as it is. Maybe you clean up the language, you clean up the structure so it's easier to learn and things like that. But the rules are essentially the same, right? Then what you have is the second wave OSR is a product that comes out of that and then modifies the game. It adds new rules, experimental rules. That's what Shadow Dark is. That's also what Lamentations of the Flame Princess is. Those are not clone games because when you play it, the play experience becomes different because of the alterations that they've done to the mechanics, which are usually to the service of some particular genre, right? In the case of like Lamentations, it's to have like what Raji calls a grindhouse game, right? Which is a particularly tough and aggressive kind of gory game. And then the third wave are products that are meant to more effectively emulate a very specific kind of genre, right? So that is, for example, Lion and Dragon and Baptism of Fire and pretty much all of my games are third wave games, right? Arrows of Indra was one of the earliest third wave games, right? Because it was Dungeons and Dragons, but meant to play in a mythic fantasy India. Now, I'm going to, I'll give you the right of reply in a moment here, but before we continue, I wanted to point out that we got a super chat here from Frank Destroso. He says, don't mind me, $1.49 to Domino's Tuna Fund and $3.50 to Sammy's Attitude Adjustment Fund. Loving the interview. So first of all, Frank, thank you very much. And though I think, though Domino does like a little bit of tuna, I only give her a small amount because she's a small cat still. But mostly the super chats that I'm getting tonight, and remember, this isn't monetized when it's live. So if you throw in a super chat, which would be great, that is going to Domino's Toy Fund because she does really love her toys. So as you also might have seen recently, she also likes to play with bits of fluff. And so I appreciate to anyone who wants to put in a super chat. It'll be going to Domino's Fund. I'd show her right now, but she's sleeping and I don't want to wake her up. She'll probably be up in a little while trying to bite me. Sadwings Raging, $10. Domino Coffee Fund. Yeah, well, the coffee fund is for me, but I'll make sure Domino gets something out of it too. I think that's all of the super chats for the moment. So we can get back to it. And I want to, I don't know if you have anything to say about the different categories of the OSR, but maybe first, if you don't mind, we should start by how about you give everybody an introduction to your YouTube channel? Because we're now up to about 50 viewers, and I'm pretty sure that a good number of them probably did not know about your channel until today.
Sure. So I do run a YouTube channel, so at Rollstats, just like it sounds.
The link is in the description of the live stream.
Yep. And I do primarily RPG reviews. So again, primarily old school stuff, older stuff, but newer OSR stuff. I don't do, any WotC products. I won't do WotC products, but everything else is fair game. Generally things that I like. So whether that be rule systems or adventures, but I do deep dive. So again, if you want a 12-minute in-out fancy jump cut B-roll flip through, I'm not your guy. There's tons of people out there. I'm sure you'll find one. However, if you really want, a deep dive into the mechanics of a system, what works, what doesn't, what's good, what's not, or an adventure, I'm your guy, right? Here's the thing. This isn't my gig. What I mean is this isn't my paying job, right? I have a day job. I make no money off of this. I do this for the love of the game. And so I'm not going to lie to you, right? I'm going to give you my opinion. You may not agree with that opinion, but I promise you that I will always give you, my honest opinion. So Pundit, you can certainly vouch for this, right? I do not accept money for reviews. In fact, I don't even tell the reviewers or I don't tell the producers of the particular products that I'm reviewing their products. I will not take free product to review. And believe it or not, I get asked all the time to do reviews. Like people will send me PDFs and I have to tell them I don't do that, right? Like that's not how I operate, because I want to be 100% open and honest. And here's the thing, even if you're just getting free product, you can be influenced by receiving that free product. Granted, you're not getting paid, but you still, because you got that product for free, you may want to give it, you might let some things slide that you normally wouldn't, simply because you received the free product. I just don't think it's ethical, right? Like that's just me. And so I won't do that.
Not only do I disagree with you on that particular, like I'm very sternly against payola, right? That people are getting merch or are getting access or are getting literally money to review a product, right? Which is also technically against YouTube rules unless you report it, right? Unless you make a point that it's that you're being sponsored essentially. But in the history of book reviewing, right, both in academia and in literary circles, it's completely standard that if somebody is a let's say a professional reviewer, right, that the books themselves will be sent to them as an example, right? With but that comes with the understanding that gives no promise of a positive review, right? And that's always how I've done it.
I 100% agree, right? Like what I'm saying is, because you send me a book, right, or you send me a PDF of your book, it doesn't mean that I'm going to review it, right? I have no obligation to you to review that product. I will look at the product, and if I like it, I will review it if I feel it merits a review. But sometimes I'm sure you get them all the time, Pundit, right? Like you'll get.
I've set up a kind of an ethical set of rules for myself, right? Which is, I only review print products. Part of that being because I have no idea how to make screenshots or things like that on video, so I have to like show the book, right? So I need to have a physical book to do it, right? So I only, and also if I accepted PDFs, I'd be flooded, right? So so if people actually want me to review a book of theirs, they have to mail it to me, right? And you know, that's a little bit complicated for being in South America. But then part of my rule is actually, if somebody, assuming that somebody contacted me beforehand, asked me to send it, which they're going to have to because they need to know where to send it to. If it's an RPG product and if they send it to me, I will review it, right? And that means that I can't be playing favorites in any way, right? So I have to review the book. And now sometimes that might be a book that I'll say this is an awful book, right? And there have been some people over the years that have sent me books that they know I'm not going to like,
right?
And they know I'm going to give a bad review, but the attention will still get them sales, right? So they're still happy with that.
And that's what I'm saying. That's my next question. What if, so, you know, there is just really some subpar material out there. Like, do you still feel obligated to review something because someone sent it to you, even if
I see it as a public service, right? Because people who understand, you know, most of the people who are watching are going to be people who kind of get what my deal is, right? And so there are going to be some people that don't like my deal, and they're going to be like, well, maybe I will like this game, right? And then there'll be other people who know what I'm about, and they kind of on the same track, and so they will be forewarned if this is a bad product, you know. And so the only thing I make it very clear to anyone who sends me a book that there's no guarantee that it's going to be a positive review, right? But I do get every book that I actually get, I will review specifically so that it isn't a question of me like playing favorites with anyone, you know.
All right, I'm sending you a copy of Blue Rose, and I want to see your review. I want to see the Pundit review of Blue Rose.
I reviewed Blue Rose in like 200005. I've already done that one. You can't send me a book that I've already reviewed.
Then I'm going to have to go back. Is that video still live, or was that on the Zanga blog?
No, that was on the blog. Yeah, it was a written review.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got an idea of what your channel is essentially reviews, right? That's, as far as I've seen, that's almost the entirety of what you do.
It is.
Now, what is it? Would you describe yourself as kind of amateur? Do you have some kind of professional experience in reviewing products? And also, like, what is your level of experience with like the RPG hobby in terms of the context of how that applies to your? Because I've seen some of your reviews, and it's obvious that you've got a pretty good knowledge of, you know, your most recent video was where you were reviewing somebody's list of the best D&D adventures of all time. Not all of which I agreed with, but that you had clearly known about all of them, right? So what's your whole background essentially?
So I discovered RPG. Well, so first of all, let's step back. In terms of, do I have any professional sort of chops in terms of reviewing? No, although, you know, I've been in marketing for longer than I care to admit. You know, I don't want to reveal my age, but it's been quite a long time, right? And so from that perspective, it does three things. One, I know how to communicate, right? Like, so it helps me in terms of communicating. So that radio voice and that ability to convey my thoughts and opinions and ideas, right? But two, also, you know, I'm used to reviewing products, right? I'm used to, marketing is marketing. It doesn't matter what the widget is, right? You're able to review a product, and you're able to spot, you know, weaknesses and strengths within that product. You learn to read the market, and so yeah, I think that background, that marketing background, has certainly helped me in my reviewing career, if you want to call it that. But no, I'm not a professional book reviewer by any stretch of the imagination. But I have been playing RPGs since I was 12 years old, right? Like, so I will reveal my age here, right? I discovered I discovered RPGs in 1981 with, you know, Moldvay BX, right? And Moldvay BX will always be the best game ever, right? And 100% that has a lot to do with nostalgia. But I will say, and now we're talking about you know, sort of clones, retro clones, first wave, second wave, third wave. BX started it all, right? Like, what I mean is, and here's the thing, right? Like, we can talk about AD&D all day long, right? Like, we can talk about AD&D all day long. It's too codified, right? Like, this is my issue with most modern games. When you codify everything, you create a right and wrong way to play, right? People begin to look to their character sheet, you know, as a way to solve a problem, as opposed to just using their, you know, imagination and creativity, right? BX absolutely embraced that, and I think that the best part of RPGs, right? The best part of RPGs is not power gaming. It is not min-maxing. It is not creating the ultimate godlike character on a sheet of paper where you have, you know, multiple feats and abilities and skills. Like, that's sad and boring. And hey, if you like to play that way, great. I get it, right? But also, to me, that's just boring. It's boring to play. It's boring to run. I don't want to do that. I want to use my imagination. I want to use my creativity. I want to, like, I want to be a good player, not a good character, right? Like, and I just, I think that I started there, right, in BX, and then, of course, just like everyone else, I moved on to AD&D and became really bored, right? Second edition came out, and everyone went to the new books, and second edition kind of, you know, started to introduce skills and things of that nature, and then third edition came out, and your audience is going to hate me for this. Third edition destroyed the game of D&D. It destroyed it, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why, because that is when the D20 system, like, came out and took over, right? That's when skills and feats and power gaming and min-maxing and over-optimization just took over the hobby, right? And that's just, to me, that was sad. And I got really bored of it really, really, really fast. It just... Well, you know,
I don't think that most of the people watching right now, the 50 people watching, would necessarily disagree with that, because I think most of the people here are OSR people, and I've a lot of what you were just saying, I've commented myself recently. Like I pointed out that in the OSR, the largest number of clones and the largest number of core systems for second and third wave OSR games are based on BX, right? And BX, or BECME, or whatever you want to call it, right? That was out of
BECME is different. Don't make that mistake. Everyone makes that mistake. BX is Moldvay. BX is Moldvay Cook. BECME was Frank Menser, right? Like, so
but they built on each other, right? Like it was it was additions, right? But the point is that was, to me, the crispest, cleanest version of official D&D that there ever was, right? And I think that's very clear. And you're absolutely right. I've pointed out tons of time how it was actually intentional of Monty Cook and Jonathan Tweed to design third edition to be something where system mastery was like highly rewarded, right? And that was probably the worst thing. Now, it did some good things. I don't think that there's that it's bad to have streamlined the core mechanic to some degrees, right? Which isn't to say you can't have subsystems.
I still think the roll under
beyond the limits of that, but in principle, having a base coherent system is good, and you see that even a lot of OSR games do that too now, right? So
sure. I'm not necessarily against the D20 system, although again, as I was going to say, that I still think the roll under mechanic was much more elegant and it made stats matter so much more, right? But I'm not against the D20 system. What I'm against, right, is really the way that characters became gods, right? Like to me, right, the most enjoyable level of any RPG is first through third. Everyone hates first through third level. I love it. Why? Because you may die. There is a huge risk in death, and that creates excitement. When so if you're playing 5e, right, or if you're playing Pathfinder second edition, right, or if you're playing any modern role-playing system, when you hit 10th level, you're immortal. You're a god. It's impossible to kill you. How is that fun?
It's one of the biggest problems with D&D. You're right.
Yeah, it's no longer fun. You're like you know what the outcome of every encounter is going to be, and why are you playing a game? Why are you even rolling dice at that point? Like, it makes no sense to me, and I don't. Is that one
of the reasons why you like Lion and Dragon? Because you can be a 15th level warrior who kicks absolute ass, but you could die with one lucky hit from a peasant.
100%, and I actually called that out in my review, right? Like that, and so I say that, and I say that more so for modern gamers. I say this in every game that I review because I like games that have a real threat of death, of character death. Hey, the threat of character death is real. You will probably die. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's another thing, right? Like I can talk about that for hours. Why are people so literally, they're so afraid of character death? Half the time, if I'm playing a character, when on the off chance, the rare chance that I actually get to play and I'm not running a game, right? I welcome character death as long as it's meaningful, as long as my character has had a good story arc. I have no problem rolling up a new character because I'm bored with that one already. I've seen people reduced to tears because their characters died, and what's wrong with the world? Literally, what's wrong with society? That RPGs.
This is Gen Xers griping about the youngsters again, right?
It is. It literally is. I feel like I'm standing on my lawn, shaking my fist. Yeah, exactly.
I've got a question for you from the audience here. And I do love to take audience questions. I note, by the way, for anybody who this might be the first time you're watching, you don't have to do a super chat for me to highlight something that you say. Of course, if you do a super chat, I will highlight what you say. So I do know the Esnite asks, Rollstat, do you take requests for reviews, assuming you have the product?
I absolutely take requests for reviews. I love requests for reviews. And truth be told, I have an RPG library of over 800 books. So chances are I have it. If I don't have it, I will actually consider picking it up, depending on the system and, whether I care for it. Like, so in other words, so Adino the Easy Knight, if you ask, hey, will you review Blue Rose, for example, I'll probably pass, right? I have no interest in reviewing something that I have no interest in. However, if it's a system or a title that I like, I will absolutely review it. If I haven't played it, it may take me a bit longer, and I'll tell you that right away, because I obviously I have to absorb the material and read it and hopefully play test it with my group. But yeah, I absolutely take requests for reviews for sure.
We've also got a super chat here, $1.99 from Frank Destroso. I like this guy. Also, we need Blipnor merch. Frank is one of the literally dozens of people that listen to Bill the Elf's YouTube channel that has all the recordings of my now on its 13th year Last Sun campaign. And so he's making a lot of references to that campaign, which is it's funny because most of my games are like these very serious games based on history and folklore, but my longest running campaign is a Gonzo fantasy game that was originally from my DCC campaign, and he loves it, and thank you for that, Destroso. Let's see here if there's anything else I'm trying to catch up a little bit with the chat. Oh, that's a nice one. Agile Monk says, Baptism of Fire is an opus to the hobby and your best work to date. Thank you very much.
I would agree. I would agree.
Sure.
The Baptism of Fire review is actually coming. Will be coming soon. So yeah.
Oh, sure. Wonderful! I didn't know that. Thank you very much. It is a pretty good game, and coming up sometime soon will be The Last Vikings, which is a campaign setting that is set in exactly the same time as Baptism of Fire, but deals with the last pagan Vikings in the fortress of Jomsburg. And I'm sure that one's going to do really well because people like Vikings. So let's see if there's anything else here.
So the Zatran is actually asking an interesting question that I'd like to address. So he's saying, what exactly do you mean a good character arc? And what I'll say is a good character arc is anything that feels satisfying. And so what I mean is nobody wants to die in a stupid way, right? Like, so if your character, this is my issue with sort of, traps and gotchas, right? That's not fair. It's just, that's silly for a character to die sort of accidentally or in a way that doesn't contribute to the overall theme or story, right? So what I mean by a good character arc is if my character doesn't even live past first level, but he dies in a significant and meaningful way. He helps the party in some way. He uncovers some truth, or he just fulfills whatever his destiny was, right? That is a satisfying, that's a good character arc. It's satisfying. It feels good. It feels like this particular character was meant to end this way. This was his destiny, and you wouldn't take it back. I've played in many games where, DMs have tried to walk back, and this annoys me so much. The DM will try to walk back the character death. Oh, well, we can retcon this to do this, or we can say this to say, to do this. No, don't steal my story. Don't steal my destiny. Don't steal that character arc, right? Like, it was a fulfilling death, and I don't want divine intervention. I don't want to pretend like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't a crit, or maybe it wasn't like that. Don't do that, right? Like, I'd rather just die and have my character fulfill his arc. Now, the opposite of that is, I'm first level and I fall into a 20-foot pit trap, and I take D6 damage for like 2d6 damage, and I die. That's just silly. But generally, that's probably my fault because, again, I'm playing like my character is immortal or invincible, right? Like, that's, I think, the difference. The main difference between old school players and new school players is that new school players are used to being immortal, and so they take lots of risky chances and make stupid decisions because they rely on their character sheet to save them. Old school players know that their character sheet isn't worth squat. It means nothing. You roll 3d6 down the line, your stats are garbage. You have to use your own wits to survive, right? But that's what makes, at least for me, that's what makes the game fun. So
that's interesting. I have a somewhat different take on that because a lot of my games, actually pretty much all my games, including the Last Sun campaign, I treat them not as a story, but as a simulation of a living world, right? And so, like, one of the things, for example, to me makes history a more interesting subject than literature is that in literature, you have these character arcs, and so the deaths will typically be meaningful unless, I guess, the author wants it to be a meaningless death, but that's still intentional, right?
Yep.
And in real history, that does happen sometimes, I guess. I mean, like, you could say, Richard III dying in battle against Henry Tudor was a completion of a character arc. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, right? Like, you see, Richard the Lionheart, who was like the greatest warrior king that England had known, was a complete badass, and he ends up being killed by an infection from a crossbow bolt shot at him by a 14-year-old boy, like, and there's something about that says, wow, this is like a really real world that I'm in if that happens to your character, right? Which is part of the fun of my systems. When you get to high level, you're very hard to kill, but a critical can still kill you, for example, and then it can be something that was totally unexpected,
100%. So, and I'm sorry again. So Deum Servio says he wants a story game. It almost sounds like, and I'm not a member of the Forge movement, right? Like, I don't want a story game, but I do want a narrative, right? Like, there should be a narrative. Like, in other words, it's not just. RPGs are not just about numbers, right? Like, it is role playing, ROLE. It's not role playing, ROLL, right? So, no, I don't support the Forge movement. It's not like I just want a story game, but I do want a narrative, and I want an arc for my character. In other words, I want there to be some sense of fulfillment for my character. I want him to grow, in whatever way that character is meant to grow, based on whatever my random dice rolls are, right? So no, I wouldn't. I don't necessarily think it's fair to say that I'm supporting just story games, right? And then for Space Roadie, isn't the focus on using your own wits and out of character mode of play? Sure is, but it's not metagaming. Like, what I'm saying, metagaming is not necessarily as bad as everyone makes it out to be. But here's what I'll say: I would certainly prefer using my own wits than relying on the feats that were given to me by a game designer who isn't sitting at my table and who doesn't understand the dynamic of my group, right? So I actually encourage my players to use their wits to think outside of the box, and I think it makes for a more fun game. That's not for everyone, and maybe that's not for you. I would say it is certainly for me. So yeah. I mean,
I get what you're saying there for sure, and it's a very good point, and it's quite typical of old school gaming, right? That instead of doing, I don't know, like the best example might be social interactions, where you've got a situation where if you're doing a third edition type game with I guess tonight is the night where we're shitting all over third edition, but where you're like, okay, I've got to interact with this guy, so I'm going to roll diplomacy. I have +10 diplomacy, and I roll a d20, and then he does what I want, right? Or something like that. Exactly. Versus I have to actually role play it. That's a different thing, right? But I do think there is something in between story arc and just kind of playing a dungeon simulator or something like that, which is the sandbox, right? And sandbox style play means that there isn't a cleverly crafted plot by the DM, but instead what you have is a whole environment that has a whole bunch of things going on at a time. And the player characters, the story as such doesn't develop because of a preconceived idea of the DM as storyteller, but rather it is the DM as a clockwork god that has set up all these scenarios, and then the players interact with those scenarios, and it generates a whole story, right? I mean, my campaigns are usually that, you know, where the player characters are doing something based on their ambitions. They're going to be interacting with different factions and groups and things and events that are taking place in the world, and it generates stories that I never would have been able to come up with on my own, you know?
And so I 100% agree with you, and I think that is the point that I'm trying to make. Well, what I mean is, so Sandbox is the ultimate form of RPG, but in order for a sandbox to work, right, your players, they have to. There has to be some personality. There has to be some role that they play. They are developing the stories, right? And so those characters that they're playing, the ones that are investigating the sandbox, we want to go here. We want to interact with this particular faction. They're doing that in character, right? And again, not like a story game. I'm not saying that they have to play, but they are still fulfilling some sort of wish from that character. They're still they're investigating some line that character would be interested in, right? Like, so sandbox form of play is kind of the ultimate spotlight on the characters, on the player characters, right? They're making the decisions. You're simply reacting to whatever they're doing and, you know, sort of going with it. Here's the thing, right? Like, here's the thing. It takes a really good DM to run a sandbox, though, right? Because the sandbox can be the greatest. A sandbox can be the greatest form of play ever, and it can also be the worst, right? If you have an inexperienced DM or someone who is not necessarily good at running a sandbox, it can be really boring, right? And I don't know if you've ever experienced that game, but I've experienced that game on more than one occasion where you're just like, what am I doing? What are we even doing here? Why? Yeah. So
yeah, what it requires, I think, is that you have to either be a DM that has the skills yourself to generate the environment,
yep,
or a system, which is what I've been trying to do more and more as I go along. It started with Cults of Chaos, but then, you know, in Sword and Caravan and in Baptism of Fire, I've put it into the books, the setting element of those books themselves. You need to have tools that are provided in the product in the game, or in other products that you can port into the game, that have the type of generators, right? Random generators are incredible for that if they're well designed, right? The problem is not every game designer knows how to do a good random generator, right? But if you have them and they're good, you know, like Kevin Crawford's stuff, or I hope my stuff, you know, and there's several other people who do that well, that you can use those to create these plot hooks that go developing in this way that is not the DM predetermining things, but rather is it has to be a generator that accurately will reflect the genre and the nature of the setting, and then it actually doesn't become that hard for even a relatively inexperienced DM if he makes use of those tools and knows how to adjust accordingly, you know.
So I agree. Well, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying, and I think that tables, which is really what we're talking about here, right? Like, are amazing tools. I think that what I'm more addressing, or what I'm pointing out, is the delivery of the information that's within those tables. And so, in a sandbox setting, or a hex crawl, right? The way that you convey the information that the players are taking in is more important than what that information is, right? It's your use of description. It's you know, how you are describing what the players are experiencing and what they're encountering that makes it either a truly engaging and exciting encounter, or makes it like, okay, this hex is forest. Mark down forest on your hex map. Like, that's boring as hell. I'd rather watch paint.
Yeah, but again, if you're using a book where the random generator just says this hex is forest, then that's not a very good random generator.
But I agreed.
You
But
have to think
also,
about what you want to actually generate, you know.
but also most tables, right? For the sake of, you know, just fitting into a table, they utilize brevity, right? Like they have to be brief. And so they give you the faintest sort of whisper of what, you know, these people, what your party is encountering, what your players are encountering. You need to flesh that out, right? Like with sight, smell, sounds, like the whole gamut. You need to make it real.
Yeah, that's true. Those are DM skills. You're right about that. Yeah.
Yep.
We've got another super chat here, $10 from Overboard. Hey, Bill, I remember us talking about this same subject years ago. I'm a huge tabletop DM. I love terrain and I'm assuming miniatures. And most of my players are younger and like 5e mechanics. Don't hate me.
Yep. I do remember, Cujo, that you are a huge what is the terrain? The really expensive terrain that I can't remember. I can't think of the name now. Anyway, I don't hate you, Cujo. I get it. I get it. Some people are much more visual, and I get it. So yeah, I don't hate you at all. So
I've also got another super chat here from Agile Monk. Where can I get a hardcover version of Lion and Dragon? Well, Agile Monk, you can get Lion and Dragon on drive-through. The hardcover is only $28.99, which is pretty good price for a hardcover. It's also there on softcover and PDF. I'll just post the link to the chat here.
It's also a really good quality hardcover, by the way. So I have the hardcover as well. It seems
to, considering how much I've used it, it seems to hold up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. I just put the link there in the chat. Thank you for asking, and thank you for the $9.99. Let's see, anything else? No, okay, we're good for the moment. So I'm going to change subjects because Rollstats reminded me of a certain date that is today.
Also, but Dwarven Forge, yeah. It is Agile Monk. Thank you. It is Dwarven Forge terrain. That is what I was trying to think of. Thank you so much for that. So yes.
There we go. But before I switch that, I'm going to do a little, I guess, production note. If this is the first time you're on here, be sure to subscribe, like the live stream, and feel free to share it anywhere you think people will find it interesting or be pissed off about it. I'm not sure how pissed off people would be about this particular live stream, though.
Unless they're third edition fans.
Unless they're third edition guys. Check out all of my products, especially my newest product now is High-Tech Ruins, which is issue, 31 or something like that, of the Pundit Files, which you can find at the Red Room store. That's my series of 31. That's my series of periodicals that come out every 3 weeks. That are on all kinds of different subjects. So if High-Tech Ruins are not your interest, you're going to find a whole bunch of other material there, adventures, supplements, stuff for my games, stuff for games in general. And every single issue of the Pundit Files is only $3.50. So if you've got $3.50, or you can find someone who can give you $3.50, you can buy an issue of the Pundit Files. And check out the rest of the Red Room store while you're there, because this is not, I'm not being sponsored by them or anything. I just, sell my PDFs from there. But this is their 3rd anniversary, and I think they're still doing their 3rd anniversary sale right now on all of their products, all the Wretchedverse products. And I think that's a big discount that they're offering. So be sure to check it out. Also, I should note that $28.99 or whatever I said, that's I'm not sure yet, because I know that drive-through is changing all their prices because of printing increased costs. So I think that's still like what it was before. So I don't know when that's going to change. It's probably going to change sometime soon. So you might, if you're really interested in getting Lion Dragon or any of my other stuff, this might be a good moment to do it before the prices go up, unless they already have and I just didn't notice. Anyways, that's it for the commercial note. So Rollstats, I'm not the type of guy who remembers this sort of thing, but he reminded me that today is apparently the 4th of May, and so it's Star Wars Day, I guess.
May the 4th be with you. Yes.
There we go. So, and apparently you are a big Star Wars fan. Is that right?
I am absolutely a big Star Wars fan, without question. I since I was a child, so I discovered, Star Wars before I even discovered D&D, right? And so it's been a huge part of my life for most of my life. Again, until Disney simply gutted my childhood and spit on it, lit it on fire, and then pissed on it. So yeah, but other than that, Star Wars was an amazing part of my life. So yeah.
Well, I've got a friend of mine, Bill the Elf, the guy that runs the Bill the Elf channel that has the audio recordings of my Last Sun campaign, and he's also a Star Wars fanatic. He's got his car is full of Star Wars decals and things like that.
Yep.
I'm not that much of a fanatic, but obviously I as we were saying before we started, when we were talking in the back room, that I loved the original trilogy, obviously, because it's a modern recreation of the classical myth cycle, right? And it was fantastic. Now the question really is, how much of the rest of Star Wars was good? Because you pointed out in the back room, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here, that what Disney has done with it has been not to your liking, and it was not good stuff
At all.
I would say even before that, when you look at any of the rest of the Star Wars media besides the original trilogy, right? Like the extended universe, so to say. I mean, I know that there are people, the Thrawn saga and stuff like that, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of novels to begin with, but certainly not. I've never been a guy that, reads all 3,000 Star Trek novels or, whatever else, or Star Wars novels or things like that. The novels, the comics, whatever else are, the best of them are just kind of okay sci-fi, and then the worst are pretty terrible.
Yeah,
but it's absolutely Disney has gone even worse than that for other reasons, right?
It absolutely is. So the extended universe I can forgive because it's fan fiction, right? And so you don't expect it. Although Lucas promised that the extended universe would be canon, Disney rolled that back and they said, no, it's no longer canon. And I don't blame Disney for that because, again, the extended universe, it really couldn't be canon. It made no sense. It was a bunch of fan fiction written by fanboys, right? Like it was not necessarily good stuff, right? Like there was some good stuff, but not. I'm okay with that not being canon. What my issue is, right? Like I think that the prequels were, like the prequels were Lucas, and they were, they just weren't that good, right? But I'm okay with the prequels being canon, with the exception of Jar Jar Binks, who Jesus was just horrible.
It's a funny thing, right? There's always this note in historians, right, that the Emperor Tiberius was a horrible emperor, but he was the only thing that really saved him was that he picked intentionally an heir, Caligula, who he knew was going to be much more horrible than he was, and so he would not be remembered as badly compared to Caligula, right?
Right.
And I remember when the prequel movies came out. Of course, I went to see them, and I thought they were just unbelievably awful, right?
Yeah,
but
they were almost.
When the Disney ones came out, right? It was like, oh, you know what? The prequels weren't quite so bad, right?
Well, here's what I will say, and I don't know how it got produced. I don't know how it got released. I don't know what sort of whose hand was greased in order to get this particular Disney film out. But I would argue that Rogue One, which is a Disney film, is probably better than any of the prequels, right? Like Rogue One was good. It was good. At least it explained, right? Like, so many Bothans have died, for us to receive this information, and it explained that, right? Like,
Rogue One was really good,
right?
But it was also basically like whatever the Dirty Dozen in space, right?
It was.
And actually, that was already done in science fiction during the era where there was a whole bunch of sci-fi movies in the 70s and 80s. You had Battle Beyond the Stars, right? Which was also the Dirty Dozen in space. And it was probably better than Rogue One. I loved it. It had like John, I don't know if you've watched this, but it had like John Boy Walton as like the Luke Skywalker equivalent, right? I forget the name of the actor, Thomas, I think. And then it had George Peppard, right, from the not yet a member of the A-Team. He was basically the Han Solo guy, who was space cowboy in that, and it had the large-breasted Amazon women and the lizard alien, and then there was the one guy that was like this sinister assassin guy that I forget what was the actor that played, but that was a great movie, right? But I do agree though that like the only thing that was kind of salvageable that Disney has done so far is Rogue One. It was a very good movie.
Well, and it at least followed canon. What I mean is it sort of finished off an original story. Like, what was the point of Han Solo? We already know Han Solo's end. Why are you like, I don't get it, right? Like, and literally that's just a cash grab, right? Like that is someone not caring about the franchise whatsoever, right? Like not caring about the lore, not caring about the canon, basically just, trying to grab some cash, right? Like, and what Disney did to Luke Skywalker is just inexcusable. It is inexcusable what they did to Luke Skywalker.
More than that, it was insane, right? Like they gave the largest sci-fi franchise in the world to somebody who had told them that he was going to ruin it, right? He was going to deconstruct it, right? He was going to turn it around and show how stupid it was, right?
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's just sad to watch your childhood destroyed, right? Like it's sad to live so long that you have to watch. It's horrible. It's horrible. So Star Wars is a sore spot for me, and I don't acknowledge Disney Star Wars. It's not Star Wars. It's not. It's I don't know what it is, but it's not, it's not Star Wars. It stopped being Star Wars a long time ago. So
yeah. Disney has some very serious problems because everything they've touched has turned to crap at this point, right? Like, never mind. My favorite sci-fi franchise was not Star Wars. It was Doctor Who. And they've just unbelievably destroyed that,
Right.
Like, it's just incredible. I never thought, from the moment, I think I was 10 or 11 years old the first time I ever saw Doctor Who. And from that moment on, I saw everything that came out for Doctor Who, right? And including in the new series and the BBC when they were doing that, right? And I could never imagine myself not wanting to immediately watch an episode of Doctor Who. And I haven't watched any of Doctor Who since the last since the Jodie Whittaker era began in the BBC, right, where it was very clear that was just not really Doctor Who anymore,
right?
And then literally it wasn't. So so we've got a question here. So what Star Wars RPG have you tried?
So I don't particularly care for the West End Star Wars, and it's not that I don't like the RPG itself. I don't technically like the system, but
me neither. I'm surprised. Everybody always says that. Everybody always talks about how much they love it.
Yeah,
I thought it was comme ci comme ça.
Yeah. I'm not particularly a fan. However, I have run and played in a sort of bastardized version of Mothership that we play Star Wars with, and that's a good time. That's a good time.
So for me, I ran many years ago when Star Wars D20 Revised came out. I ran it was in the early 2000s. I ran that was the first Star Wars campaign I ever ran, where the player characters were it was during the Republic era, and the player characters were a kind of mixed task force of the Republic. So it explained why you had like Jedis and the rogues and technicians, all of these guys together.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty good campaign. It lasted a few years. And then the next Star Wars campaign I ran was with Star Adventurer. Fortunately, I don't think I've got it. Do I have it here? No, I don't have it here to show people. But the Star Adventurer RPG is my shortest complete RPG. It's like only like about 34 pages long, but it's basically a set of mechanics. And I made that game specifically. I made it specifically to run a Star Wars campaign, but of course I couldn't say that, right? But it is basically a skeletal framework of rules and mechanics for doing a space opera type game, right? And you can get that on drive-through for $3.99 in PDF or just $9.99 in a soft cover print edition. And I had set it up to run a Star Wars campaign that was set during the early period of the Empire, where the player characters were a group of basically criminals that found themselves in the wrong side of the Empire at the same time. And so it's kind of a rogues campaign, you could say. And it was a very good campaign. And yeah, so Star Adventure exists because I decided I wanted to try a Star Wars.
You wanted
campaign.
to create your own system. Yeah, for sure.
Now it's set up in a way that, like, you have templates for types of aliens by kind of archetypes, the big alien, the tough alien, the smart alien, the charismatic alien, stuff like that. It's got classes that are very generalized, but you can obviously see which ones are the Jedis, stuff like that. And then it has, starship mechanics, combat. It's a complete RPG, but it's a short RPG, so it leaves a lot of room for the DM to fill it in to match whatever kind of space opera game he wants to make.
Sure.
So those are the ones I ran. Let's see if there's any other.
So what is your preferred sort of theme, right? What I mean is when Pundit sits down to play, and I don't mean like one of your games, right? I mean, what is your preferred theme? Are you medieval fantasy? Are you sci-fi? Are you what is your preferred theme? What's your go-to?
Well, I've done a whole bunch of different genres and whatnot, right? But for me, because I'm a historian, and so I've gotten, at least in the last 10, 12 years now, I've been running a lot of historical campaigns. Actually, even before then, because I ran even in the early 2000s around there. I started realizing, well, I know a lot about history, and my gamers might like that, And so I started, I ran campaigns in ancient Rome in the Middle Ages. I've run a Chinese campaign. And so this kind of medieval authentic thing, which has become what I'm best known for in my best-selling games, apart from Star Adventure, which is doing really good, we're mostly historical campaigns, right? It's because all of these are based, like every book that I've put out is based on a campaign I actually run, So. Sure. My default style tends to be instead of, because D&D itself is based largely on fantasy and science fiction products that are from the pulp era up to the 1970s,
sure,
and are inspired by that mainly. My deal tends to be that instead I look back either at real history or at ancient mythologies or at folklore and legends, and use that as the engine for the game. And of course, the main thing is that most of my games, unless if I'm doing a game that is reflective of a cinematic experience, like for example, if I'm doing Star Wars, then that's a bit different, because then it's not meant to be realist in the sense of our world. It's meant to be realist in the sense of what the Star Wars world is like, for an example. But otherwise, I make it. I try to make it into a realistic interpretation of the place and culture and time and the context of it, without boring my characters, right? Without boring my players, rather, because it's I've had a lot of players that said, like, yeah, I did this campaign with you about whatever, whichever period. Well, we did a campaign about the Borgias in Italy in the 15th century, and it was like, yeah, it was a really fun campaign, but it also felt like I just took a history course, so like now next time they're talking about something, oh yeah, the Borgias, this and that, like they can actually, and it's like real history, right?
So interestingly enough, I on my review of Lion and Dragon, I received a comment, and funny enough, even though I'm a small YouTuber, I tend to get lots of comments, right? And so I received a comment that said, Lion and Dragon, seems okay, but have you checked out Dark Albion? It could be brilliant, but there's just some anti-French bigotry involved, and he really needs to edit back. And my reply was it's based on the War of the Roses. Like you get that, right? I like, how can there not be?
I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's an added irony. Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion were published by Dom Publishing, which is a French publisher.
Right.
The publisher is French. He fucking loved the whole thing with the frogmen,
Right.
I like asked him, what do you think about this? He's like, oh yeah, that's hilarious.
Well, but I mean, like, it's historically accurate, or at least based in and so I literally didn't know how to respond. My response to the comment was just, you realize it's based on the War of the Roses, right? So yeah. I think that there is, there are people that are simply just not going to get that historical basis, right? But moreover, I think that there are people who
they don't have
revisionist history. So yeah.
I don't have a problem with someone taking like Sword and Caravan and using it for like an Al-Qadim D&D setting or something like that, right? And same thing with Baptism of Fire. Any of my games, I've always said, make whatever you want to make out of it with my games. And I love, some people do like some really crazy modifications to my stuff, combining it with other games or with other settings or things like that. And I think that's fantastic, right? But I try to make sure that my books have enough material in them that and are presented in an easily accessible way that a DM who knows very little about the time period, like, who the hell knows a lot about, even I didn't know a lot before I started researching it, about like 11th century Poland, right? Like that is an obscure topic, at least for anyone who isn't Polish, right?
Yep.
And even for most Poles.
Honestly, even for most Poles, yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, of course. Most modern Poles don't know very much about the 11th century either, right? So, like this is, I made it so that the material in there would be enough for it to really show that it's different than say playing in the Forgotten Realms or something like that, right?
Exactly.
And that they will be able to capture enough of the details of what the culture was like and what the place was like and what the things were like, and be able to incorporate those things into the campaign if they want to. But nobody's saying that they have to, right?
So, which brings up another interesting. So, I feel like I have more questions for you. Arrows of Indra, right? Is that a camp? So, is that book based on a campaign that you ran, or is that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But the Arrows of Indra is a little bit different than the other ones because it's not based on an actual historical period, right? Like Sword and Caravan is during between the Third Crusades and the Mongol invasions. Yep. Baptism of Fire is the Christianization of Poland. War of the Roses is Dark Albion. But the Arrows of Indra is not based on an actual historical period, but rather the mythical period of mythic India in the Mahabharata, right? The great, that's their great foundational epic saga that they have of like the ancient kingdoms. And historically, for a long time, people thought, well, that's all kind of made up. But as usual with this sort of thing, over time, it's become clear that a lot of that isn't totally made up, but it's vastly exaggerated, obviously, right? And so it's not the world as it ever really was, but it's the world as the mythology of India presents it, right? So that makes it a bit different. but it's still very within that. It goes all in, right? It says, yeah, this is what, and a lot of Indian people liked it, which is great. I've researched the Mahabharata quite a bit, and so I hoped I did a good job, and I guess they thought so.
Yeah.
Overlord has a question here. He said, Overboard rather. He says, Pundit, would you recommend buying the Doctor Who RPG from Cubicle 7? I know you won't recommend the 5e version, but I believe they have a D6 version. I've been contemplating getting one. Well, I'm a bit partial in that sense because I was a playtester, not a playtester. Well, yeah, technically I was a playtester, but the playtesters that were a very select group, and they really influenced the mechanics of that game, right? So I was actually one of them in the original, the first edition version of the Doctor Who RPG that Cubicle 7 did. Thanks to me, they changed the core mechanic, and I invented I didn't invent. I suggested the initiative mechanic that they have, where instead of just having anybody roll a die and they act on their turn, that there are a series of different priorities of when you act in Doctor Who. So like very much in a Doctor Who style, if all they're going to do in that round is talk, they go first, right? And that's very, very clear, very key to the genre of Doctor Who, right? And the last thing that happens is like if you're attacking someone, right? Violence. And everybody, and the funny thing is, not a lot of people know that I was a consultant basically on that game. And when it came out, there were people like the story gamers, which were still a thing back then, were like going crazy about how excellent the initiative mechanic is. And then they found out that I'm the one that came up with it, and that it's essentially the initiative system from Basic Expert, right? Where it's like in Basic Expert, there are different. I think movement is the first, and then ranged attacks, and then combat, and then magic, right?
Yep.
And so I just used that template, but I shifted it into a Doctor Who template, and it turned out to work really well. But they thought it was like some brilliant story gamey sort of design, and it's not. It's just that. So yeah, I think it's a very it's really hard to do a Doctor Who RPG for a lot of reasons, right? Because there's only one Doctor Who, right? It's kind of a complicated thing, because if you're playing Doctor Who, then somebody's got to be Doctor Who, or Doctor Who's an NPC, and then it becomes too DM driven. Or if not, you could be we're other Time Lords, but then it's not really Doctor Who. So that's still a complicated issue, but there's no question to me that the only game that I've ever seen that comes close to being effective at playing a game that feels a lot like Doctor Who is the one by Cubicle 7.
That is essentially my issue with most Star Wars games, is that how is it Star Wars if it doesn't have one of the canon characters? And if it has one of the canon characters, then aren't you sort of beholden to that story, right? Like it's very hard to include Jedi in any game.
But at least in Star Wars, there's a lot of canon characters, right?
Yeah.
And so you can also play, I remember when D20 did their version of Star Wars, they did a pretty clever ad campaign in a way, where they were like showing pictures from like some scene where there's a whole bunch of guys and aliens, like in the cantina or in the parliament of the Republic or something. And they would like have a little arrow saying, "What's this guy's story?" Right? Something like that. And that's not too bad, except that sometimes you're thinking, well, like, who cares what this guy's story is, right?
Right.
But I think every time I've run Star Wars, which is only twice, but still, both were fairly long campaigns. What I had was the player characters are there. They're doing something apart that from the the canon characters in whatever period they're in, and so that the canon characters are there somewhere doing something, but you're not running into them constantly. But once in a blue moon, you run into somebody who's a canon character, right? Like the Star Adventure one I did, they ended up not because they were great heroes, because on the contrary, they were kind of criminals, right? It was kind of a Blake Seven sort of thing. They ended up having to make deals with the nascent rebellion, right? So they ended up meeting at some point Mon Mothma and some of the early rebel leaders, right?
Sure.
And that's kind of okay, right? But Doctor Who it's like if you're running a Batman RPG, right? So like Batman RPG is about Batman, right? And
Right.
if Batman's not there, then that's a problem. And if Batman is there, that's a problem.
Right.
Right.
Batman would have to be
Batman
would have to be an NPC, and you would have to be criminals, right? Like that's the only way to run that, I think. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know why? So here's a question, right? So and why are there no Western RPGs? And I know there are some, right? Like why are there so few Western RPGs, and why are they no good? Because I feel like that genre is really underserved and could be extremely popular. And I cannot figure out for the life of me why there are not more Western RPGs, other than they are in some way like, I don't know, problematic or offensive or something, right? Like, but I feel like that market is completely underserved. I don't understand why.
And that's an interesting question for sure. Before I continue, I'll do a little ad blurb here for the Pundit Files issue 25, the Wild West timeline. So this is a complete timeline if you want to run a campaign in the Wild West that is of the historical events that happened in the Wild West during the peak period of the Wild West from like the 1870s until the 1890s. It's all historical. It's all like events that actually happened, or at least events that I had to sometimes choose, like which events I'm going to decide happened or not, because some of it was hearsay, right? But it's all history, right? It's not, there's no magic or, aliens or anything like that in it. It's a timeline of the real Wild West, the famous characters in the Wild West, slightly less famous characters that are really interesting. And it kind of tells you what each of them were doing at different points in time in those years, right? So you can use it as a timeline for the basis of a Wild West campaign. And that was, in fact, the timeline. I was running short on time to do a Pundit Files issue. And then I suddenly remembered, I ran a fantastic Aces and Eights campaign that was entirely historic, right? No alternate history, no anything else. It was just the actual Wild West, right? And I did a timeline for it when I was creating the campaign. And I said, I could just, this timeline is about the right size for a Pundit Files issue. And I bet there's some people that are going to like it. So I put it in there, right? So you can pick that up at the Red Room.
So I will absolutely pick that up. And also, I swear, I promise that was not planned. That was.
No, and it has no RPG mechanics or content in it. It is just, if you want to know who was doing what when, and some of the, like where was Wyatt Earp at such and such time or whatever, right? And not just Wyatt Earp, but a whole bunch of other characters that are like incredible. There are some incredible stories that have never really been told as much as some of, there's some of the legendary ones, Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, Billy the Kid, the Jesse James, etc. But there's a lot of like lesser known characters that were absolutely fascinating that I found out about over the years, and it's some of them only when I was doing this Wild West campaign.
So Jeffrey Garrison.
So anyways, to get to your question though, I think probably one of the problems is that I think that first of all, the Wild West is a genre that hit its peak probably at the time of like the silent generation, like not even the baby boomers. By the time the baby boomers were around, for them it was they were kind of like deconstructing it and making it campy and stuff like that, and after that, we've had some great westerns that have come out after that, Western movies and Western novels and what have you, but like Zane Grey is something that your grandpa or great grandpa read, it wasn't something that you read, and so that's the first problem.
So I would agree, although I would argue, right, that the Western genre offers just as much opportunity for adventure, exploration, and storytelling as medieval fantasy, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is. Yeah.
But the other problem is that there's a lot of people that are in the modern, especially in a modern context, they think that playing a game that is just entirely historically modern, because there are a lot of Western games, but most of them are like, oh, this is the Wild West but with aliens, or this is the Wild West but with zombies, or this is the Wild West in an alternate timeline, you know, or stuff like that, right? Because they're just Wild West with magic, right? All of that stuff, right? And Wild West with elves, you know, and so they feel like they have to do that for it to be playable, right? And
I want a historically accurate Western setting, right? Like I think that would be amazing. I would play it all the time. I would. I don't necessarily think that you need to Cthulhify Westerns in order to make them playable or exciting, or I don't. So
yeah, but I do think a lot of gamers do, and I mean, I think it's the same reason, for example, that you don't usually have, like, there is no detectives RPG, right? Like there's, you know, how many cop series are there even today, right? Even nowadays, never mind a couple of decades ago. And there's never really been an RPG about playing, you know, a police officer or a detective or an FBI agent without there being something else involved, right? The X-Files or whatever.
Yeah, good.
So
good.
I think that's the first and biggest barrier, right? So yeah, I think that maybe besides that,
if someone invented a system that embraced sort of that Sergio Leone kind of dark spaghetti Western version, right? I would be Lee Van Cleef in a heartbeat, right? Like I would want to play that. I would want to play in that world.
In that case, I have a treat for you, because the Wretched Verse, you know, the Wretched Verse is the multiverse of OSR products that the Red Room store makes. I don't know how they do this, because like they almost, I mean, I think they outpace me in terms of print books at this point, and they've only been around for 3 years. You know, it's incredible how productive they are.
Right.
And almost all of their games are part of like this kind of shared concept multiverse of games, right? That's called the Wretched Verse, and it's what I call a genre that I've termed for them to be called spaghetti punk, right? Because it's the moral style of a spaghetti Western, but applied to all kinds of genres, to fantasy, to sci-fi, to cyberpunk, to superheroes, to all sorts of things. But of course, they have, you know, the Wretched Western game, right? And that's actually a really, really good, really good Wild West game. It's an OSR game, and it's not so much historical. It is I mean, literally, it had to be for them, right? Because this is like the place where it most applies, right? It is specifically if you want to do kind of the Sergio Leone style, you know, the bad, the good, and the ugly, like the
moral,
the Italian
yeah.
And it's called Wretched Verse because the characters in the setting are generally anti-heroes, right? They're these guys that are you know, that they're driven by their vices and things like that, you know. And so I would say that is at this point the best option for someone who wants to have sorry, it's called Wretched Country, actually, I guess. I've forgotten what it was. Wretched Country. There we go. That's the name of their cowboy game. And it is, although they do have some options for like doing like Native American ritual magic, or that there could be like monsters in the desert or things like that. But that's like, you know, it's an add-on, right? That's in the book, but you don't have to use it, right? You can make it a completely straight Western game. And I reviewed it. It's quite good. You know, I really obviously was going to be quite drawn to it. So yeah, that is your best option, actually. I think it's from.
I will absolutely,
especially if what you want is that kind of game, right? That specifically with that anti-hero type style.
Yep, absolutely. I will absolutely check it out.
Okay, so let me see here if there's anything else. Samuel Wright says an RPG based on the Untouchables or Gunsmoke would be amazing. Yeah, well, there you go. A large part of my Wild West campaign was based in Dodge City, though it wasn't Gunsmoke. It was more like the real Dodge City. You know, the mayor of Dodge City at the time, he was this really crazy guy who he had a pet bear that he kept in his saloon because he was one of the big saloon owners, right?
Sure.
And And like, you know, everybody in the campaign, everybody was like really endeared to this bear named Patty was the name of the bear, right? And then like a few years later, he you know, he was, I guess I think the historical reason was that he was getting too big and kind of out of control. But basically on a Christmas Eve, they shot him and ate him. It's like, what the, you know, that's the past is another country, right? Like they had a pet bear that just shot him and the whole town ate him, you know, like it was, oh my God. I couldn't believe, when I read that in the history, I just couldn't believe it. You know?
I don't know. I'll check it out. I'll check it out. I absolutely have been looking, and you're right. You know, there are quite a few Western themed game systems out there, but they're all Cthulhu-fied, right? They're all some alternate history or alternate reality, multi-dimensional Western. So yeah.
So I had a follow-up question after the Star Wars one for you, but I think I'm guessing that your answer is going to be Disney. Is like, what do you think is the worst in terms of like the current woke media? You know, like what is?
Yeah, so I would probably say Disney is 100% the worst. And you know, like I will go even beyond that. I would just say the entertainment industry in general is just one huge propaganda machine that is literally rewriting. I mean, it's Orwellian, right? Like it is literally Orwellian. And you know, we are at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia.
And it's unwatchable.
We are at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia, and people eat it up. It's insane. So yeah. So
it's horrific. Yeah, you know, it's gotten to where like if I want to watch good programs, it has to be stuff that isn't made in America or Europe. You know, because
100%. Yep,
it's all just terrible garbage for the most part. Now that brings me to recommend to you guys. There's an Argentinian series that just came out that's called the Ethernaut, El Eternauta. That's on Netflix. I don't know if you could get it in the US in Netflix, but it is based on a comic from the late 1950s in the golden age of Latin American comic book creation. And it's essentially an apocalyptic story. And they've made it now, like this is a famous comic book. Everybody in Latin America knows about it. And they've now made it into a Netflix series, and it is fantastic. Like I've watched the first 3 episodes so far. I think there's 6 episodes, but it's incredible because it is, you know, it's a great story. The comic itself is great, right? But it also they didn't change the main character into like a trans black lesbian or something. You know, there's none of that stuff in there, right?
Are you kidding me? Where's the representation, Pundit? How can
in fact, it's even funnier because like so the guy who created the comic originally, he was when he created the comic, he wasn't really a political guy, right? But then a couple of decades later in the 70s, when there was all the problems going on in Argentina with, you know, that led to the Argentinian dictatorship, his daughter had become like a radical communist activist. She actually killed a guy at one point in like some kind of a, you know, communist terrorist act. And he like kind of ended up being swayed by her and her friends. And then eventually he was disappeared by the junta when the dictatorship took over, right? And so after that, the left in Argentina tried to argue that the Ethernaut is actually a story about the evils of American imperialism or something, which it never was in the original version.
Okay, but I was just going to say, this sounds eerily familiar to the Patty Hearst story. This sounds like Latin American Patty Hearst, right? Like, isn't that?
Yeah. And so like they tried to claim it as theirs, right? And
right.
I don't know I'm sure you know that recently, the last couple of years now, for the first time in decades, there's been a non-left-wing government in Argentina by Javier Milei, who's a radical libertarian, right? And one of the first things he did is he killed the equivalent of what was like PBS or NPR or stuff like that, or the BBC, that version, and also that department that funded the creation of Argentinian television and art, right? Because they were arguing that without it, it would just be American stuff. There would be nothing. There'd be no product of itself, right? And the Either Not, this series, they tried to make it like 3 other times before that, and it was just impossible because of the special effects and all that. And so the Either Not is actually like one of the first series that has come out in Argentinian, an Argentinian television series that was not funded. It never got any government money, right? And so that meant they didn't have to put any of that stuff in. And I don't know if it's that Netflix just didn't care, or that they've decided they actually want to make money, but they didn't. Nobody told them, no, you have to put in more black people in here or something like that, or more lesbians or more trans people or something. And so they didn't do that. And the series is actually it's actually fairly close to the original comic, but it actually has a stronger emphasis on kind of the importance of like individual heroism, right? Like, and in the idea, like actually the good guys in the series end up being, like the armed forces and the church and things like that, right? And regular people. And almost anytime you see like a group of people trying to act collectively, they end up committing horrible atrocities, or trying to.
I'm not sure
bad
how...
guys. The bad guys in the series are literally a race of cockroach type aliens, right? Which is very funny because in Argentina specifically, the pejorative term for a leftist is a cuca, which is a cucaracha, right? A cockroach, right? So
right.
It couldn't be like more right-wing coded if it tried, like it's the main character is an army veteran, like all this stuff that they've got in there. It's like and they for years this comic was like something that the left tried to claim, and they're furious about the fact that it's turned out the way it has, like so it's very good. Very worth watching.
How did that get greenlit by Netflix? Someone was asleep at the switch.
I watched as I've said, because of the how horrible most US and European, at least the English programs are.
Yep.
I've watched a lot of foreign language Netflix stuff, and usually that's really good. I think Netflix says, well, we're not gonna force these guys to do this stuff, right? Like, so I've watched. There's a lot of like Spanish programs on Netflix, like from Spain, some from Latin America, even some Mexican ones, and then like some of the Korean shows have been really good, right?
Yeah.
Kingdom, which is a zombie apocalypse in the Middle Ages of Korea, excellent show. And like you watch those, and it feels so refreshing because it's something you've never seen before.
Yeah.
It's not like you're watching an old show again because the new stuff is such crap.
Yeah.
But it's like something that doesn't have any of the garbage that they put into, the actual shows that in the English speaking West.
It passes the censorship bar because it's the how dare you interfere with their culture. Like that's why it gets through. They're afraid to. Right.
So it's great show. The Eternauta, the El Eternauta, strongly recommended. But sorry, I jumped into that, and I don't know if we had anything else to say about the state of woke media at this point, but I think that says it all pretty much.
I think woke media speaks for themselves. So yeah.
Dice Tail says he thinks it's probably that Netflix executives don't want to read subtitles, so they don't even pay attention.
Yeah, right. We have reached idiocracy states of being in the U.S. So yeah, for sure.
All right, so the next thing, I know that you don't really talk a lot about current day D&D and stuff like that.
I don't.
So you don't really follow any of the disasters that WotC has been doing with 5th edition at this point.
Yeah, no. I try not to. So, sort of D&D, I don't know, whatever it is now, 5.25 or whatever. Like, I don't know what
they don't have a name for it even. Yeah. I call it 2024 D&D, but.
Yeah, it's not something that I am interested in. It's not something that I would ever. So When 5e, so I will tell you that when 5e came out, I was very interested in 5e. I liked 5e because it was a throwback to a much rules light system, right? Like, so I saw they really sort of brought back a lot of different rules from many different systems throughout the years, and I was really excited for 5e when it initially came out, and then. Then the culture wars began because when 5e first came out, I don't know necessarily that it was, I won't say it was completely apolitical, right? But it was not as obvious. It was not as blatant propaganda as it became, right? And then, things like, I think when I really got turned off on 5e, when I was like, no, I'm putting this down, I'm not playing this anymore, was when Tasha's Cauldron of Everything That Broke the Game came out, right? And it was horrible. And then the adventures that began to come out, like Wild Beyond the Witchlight and sort of D&D Prom, and it was. What is this game? What am I playing? Right? Like I have literally no interest in any of the content that this company is putting out. This is clearly not written for me. It's not meant for me, and they don't want my money. And so I sort of stopped giving them my money, and I stopped talking about them. They were no longer a part of my life. So no, I try to stay away from sort of all the WotC drama. So when the whole OGL crisis sort of happened, who cares? I don't care. And quite frankly, if you're still supporting that company, then good for you. You deserve whatever happened to you because of the OGL crisis, right? Like, so I don't think that WotC specifically or Hasbro in general, cares at all about Dungeons and Dragons players. They don't. They literally don't care about the IP that they own, to the point where, and okay, I'm just gonna say this, right? Like Jeremy Crawford, right? Like he destroyed that IP and then left, right? Like whether he was asked to leave or whether he left on his own, he destroyed it, and then now he just walks. And the other gentleman, and I'm not going to say his name because, like, again, I'm sure he's he's well respected within the D&D community, at least amongst some. Also left after what I consider, look, Perkins drove that ship into the ground, and then they just walk, right? And so what's left is just let it burn. As far as I'm concerned, let it burn. D&D doesn't live with that IP any longer. D&D lives in third-party products. D&D lives in the OSR. D&D lives, in independent publishers. D&D is not, they may own the IP. They may own the logo, but they don't own the game. It's beyond that. It's in the hearts and minds and souls of the people who actually play the game, not people who are actively trying to destroy the game. That's about as political, I guess, as I'll get. So yeah. That's
all very true and quite correct. And I made a similar sentiment in a recent video where I said, what game will replace D&D? And I said the answer is D&D will replace the WotC D&D.
Yep.
But it is. I think it's very interesting to me that the new edition is probably the worst selling official edition of D&D ever. And
is that surprising to you? I guess
no, it's not surprising. Because it was horrible.
They're not making games for D&D players or D&D fans. They're making a game for 0.027% of the population, and they don't even play D&D.
What's funny to me though is that they're going to do the exact same thing that happened with 4th edition, which was previously the worst selling ever. In that they're gonna keep doubling down into this gigantic money pit, right? Like they knew, now it's come out, right, with 4th edition, that within like 6 to 8 weeks of when they produced it, when they put it out, that they knew that it was failing, right? And then they decided to spend another how many years throwing money in there and to try to find a way to make it popular, and it was just a disaster, right?
Yep.
And now it's going to happen all over again. But I mean, that does make sense because literally nobody is left from even from the time of 4th edition that is still there now, right? Like that are going to be able to like tell them, you probably don't want to do this, right?
Yep.
But you're very correct in terms of what you've said about the spirit of D&D is a totally other thing that is independent of these guys. And you're also correct in when you say you said it as if this is your feeling, which is that the Wizards of the Coast doesn't really care about D&D, and Hasbro doesn't care about D&D. But it's actually not just your feeling. It's something they've made as statements of fact,
right,
in multiple stockholder reports, right, where they have said, we want D&D to be a brand, right? And when they say we want it to be a brand, they mean we don't really care about the books, right? It's like, Paramount or whatever, I forget if it's Paramount or the other one, doesn't really care about Marvel Comics, right? They care about the Marvel brand, right? And so they're looking at things like merchandising and stuff like that. And in this like latest, the first quarter 2025 report that just came out, they talked again about how they're going deep. They're going to keep trying to go into digital gaming, right? And so like the virtual tabletop collapsed, which was what would have been like D&D in a virtual setting, but they're now talking about like how they've done Minecraft D&D, and they're probably going to do D&D Go instead of Monopoly Go and stuff like that, right? Or D&D Monopoly Go or whatever you want to call it, right? And they're going to look at it as a brand name that they can use, for farming out to all kinds of merchandising products, So this is the number one problem, right? They don't really care what the game itself looks like, because that they know that's never going to make them a lot of money.
But so, and from a marketing perspective, right? Like they are destroying the brand. They are not just destroying the game. They are literally murdering the brand.
You can't have merchandising for something nobody likes.
Exactly.
Right? That's the problem. The
Right.
reason D&D merchandising in any way became popular was because for a while D&D 5th edition was popular, right?
Yep.
But as soon as people stopped liking it,
Yep.
I
honestly, I don't know anyone that is excited or likes D&D 5.25, D&D 2024, D&D 2025, whatever you want to call it. I don't even hardcore fans, right? Even shills don't like it, right? Like I don't.
Yeah. Even most of the, except for the guys that are like literally on WotC's payroll,
right?
All the rest of the 5e YouTubers are. I don't know if you've seen this, but in the last couple of months, they've all been in a panic because their numbers are collapsing because nobody's interested in 5th edition D&D. And I'm like, looking at it, people were asking me, like, are you having trouble because nobody's looking at RPG channels? I'm like, no, I'm getting like really good views still, right?
Yeah.
It's because I'm not talking about 5th edition. It's only the 5th edition stuff that's collapsing because they've killed it. Like that's the problem.
Yeah, for sure. They literally destroyed the brand. It was hard to do. If you think back to just before the pandemic and through the pandemic, more people were talking about D&D than I had ever experienced in my life, ever, right? Like everyone knew what D&D was. Yeah. And now I just don't get it. I just don't get it. So,
well, DEI stuff for once, the latest quarterly report barely mentioned D&D, and it's very clear. Like I said this in my most recent video, I think, that in these quarterly reports they can't lie to stockholders, right? So instead they choose what areas they focus. They want to say, whatever, Magic the Gathering, Monopoly Go made a ton of money, right?
Yep.
Then they don't mention what happened with D&D, right?
Yep.
They just kind of included in there, right? Wizards of the Coast, which includes Dungeons and Dragons, and blah blah blah. And then look at how much money, Monopoly Go did, right? And so, like the real problem there was that somebody continued to try to insist to the executives of WotC that if you just filled the artwork of the new books with black women, you'd get 1 million black women playing the game. And everybody knew that was never going to happen,
So again, no, that's not. But again, that I don't think that is a fair assessment. Again, this goes back to earlier. This is the ESG argument, right? Like what's happening is it's not necessarily that they're saying, oh, if you put a bunch of black women in the book, that it's going to sell amazingly. What they are saying is like, we need representation within these books so that, we can be publicly traded on this particular exchange, right? Like,
sure, there is that too, of course, that pressure. But the argument that they always try to claim is that the reason certain people don't play D&D, the reason black women, let's say, don't play D&D is because they've never been shown in D&D, right? And that's not true. It's because they would never be interested in D&D. Right?
No, I agree. I agree with you. That was
there are some black women that play D&D, but
and that was the point I was trying to make earlier. WotC is creating a game for 0.027% of the population, and none of that 0.027% of the population plays the game. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. So yeah.
There's also a thread just recently on X where someone was showing some of the artwork of like from the new player. I think it was the Player's Handbook. I don't know. It was one of the 3 books, right? It was like a village scene, and the village was like everything there. Everybody there was some kind of fantastical creature, right? You had like some kind of an Aasimar or something, and tieflings and orcs, and and they were all just kind of, hey, it was all totally normal. There was magic everywhere, right? And there was pointing out that I think the quote was something like, if everything is magical, nothing is, right? And that's another thing that they've done is they've turned it into some of the designers were saying this literally, oh, we don't really want to have heroic adventuring. What we want is for people to run campaigns that are slice of life campaigns, right? Where you're not going to go fight in a dungeon. Right. You're going to have a spa day, or you're going to
you're gonna run a boutique potion shop in
exactly.
I
was gonna play that.
The thing is, though, I don't think anyone is going to play that, right? And so it's so silly. It's so silly that they're going to fall over backwards to create a product that no one's going to buy to sort of appease the extremist Twitter crowd, right? Like, or I'm sorry, now like the blue sky crowd, right? Like
the former Tumblr crowd turned Twitter crowd turned blue sky crowd. Yeah, it's the same group of assholes that have just been migrating to wherever they can keep being assholes.
Exactly. So but the thing is, that very vocal and extremist crowd, they don't actually purchase RPGs, right? Like they just bitch about RPGs. They don't actually play them.
They complain about how this RPG is sexist, racist, and homophobic. Right. And then no matter what you do with it, they're not going to buy it. Right. They just don't. They want people who they know will hate the changes to stop buying it. Right. That's the actual goal. Yeah.
Right.
David Brown here points out he's spent more money this year than he's ever spent on gaming, and none of it is is WotC stuff, obviously. Thank you for getting Lion and Dragon there, David. I appreciate that. So yeah, well, I think we're getting to the end now. We're past the 2-hour mark. So I guess it's, unless anyone in the audience has any more questions for Rollstats about, anything really, but about reviewing or about anything else. Buzzy says, what CNC? That's Castles and Crusades. It's one of it's technically Castles and Crusades isn't really OSR. I mean, originally when it came out, it was, but it was a big influence on the OSR, because it's actually kind of like a 3rd edition game that has a lot of old school elements to it. And that was one of the things that inspired some people to do
3rd edition. Yeah, right. So,
but that inspired a lot of people. And nowadays, most people think of CNC as an OSR game anyways. And that's fair enough. Anybody else? Any other questions for our guest tonight?
I think everyone in the comments should start. Literally, you should start a petition, a campaign to get Pundit to restart inappropriate characters, and I would love to be an inappropriate character on the show. So yeah, I think everyone in the comments should petition Pundit to do that, and I'll get you later.
Well, here's the thing: it's the original band is broken up, and that's it's not quite the same thing. But however, Ryan David is still actually using the inappropriate characters term. He's got a new group. It's him, Eric Tenkar, and Grim Jim, one of the originals, that are on Rumble. So if you want some version of inappropriate characters, you can check it out there. Though I admit that that's like BBC Top Gear after Jeremy Clarkson left, right? Because I was the Jeremy Clarkson of the group. I'm the one that came up with the idea.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've gone out of my kind of panel format and into like I don't know if I'm being whether I'm being Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson or Jordan Peterson here, but I decided, since on my channel I can actually do a one-on-one interview. I like doing those one-on-one interviews because it lets us deep dive into the person that I've invited, and it's always a different guest, So
for sure.
I'm liking it. I'm enjoying this.
For sure.
So obviously the RPG Pundit Encounter is a play on the Joe Rogan experience, right?
Right.
Ironically, I don't think I've ever seen an entire complete episode of Rogan though, like because he goes really long.
Right.
I've seen a lot of clips of his stuff. All right, so the final question, as always, I'm sure if you've seen any of my episodes, what's coming here. So I've often pointed out to people that when I started playing D&D when I was 11 years old, and this was in junior high, I guess, I was the nerdiest kid at the table, right? Because at that time, at that year, and you could probably, if you're from the same area, you could probably guess what years we're talking about.
Yep.
At that time, D&D was being played by a wide variety of people. It was almost as mainstream popular as it was in the 5e era peak, right?
Yep.
And so most of the other guys at my table were like skater dudes or heavy metal dudes or even sports dudes or whatever. And I was the kind of nerdy kid, right?
Yep.
And within a few years after that had vanished, right? Like by the time I was in high school, basically. And I was always the least nerdy person at the table, which I hadn't changed that much. I gotten a bit less nerdy, but it was really that everybody else who wasn't nerdy had vanished, and the people that were left were the nerdier guys, right? And I'm a weird person in this hobby even today, because I think most people who play RPGs have a lot of other nerd interests, right? Like they play video games, they watch anime, they read tons of Star Wars and Star Trek novels or fantasy, those 50-book fantasy novels of,
yep.
What I would consider like B-grade novels, right?
Sure.
And they read comic books and they collect Funko Pops and play with miniatures and all that stuff. And I don't do any of those things, right? Like I play RPGs and, I watch mainstream, like I've gone to watch Marvel movies and stuff like that, but that's not really a nerdy thing anymore because it's become completely mainstream.
Yep.
I never watch anime. I don't do any of that stuff, right? So I've been asking every one of my guests. Here's Driving and Dragons. Driving and Dragons is the current reigning champion of being like the least nerdy guy because he plays D&D and he fixes cars, which is like the least nerdy thing that's imaginable, right? Like it's the opposite of what a nerd does, right? He's like, I kind of imagine him as like being a side character on the Dukes of Hazzard or something, but he has taken the prize every time. So the question for you is like, how nerdy are you? You obviously are a big Star Wars fan to the point that it's beyond just like watching the film. So
yep.
You've got a Star Wars tattoo literally. So I know you're already like 20 points behind, but
yep.
What other nerdy stuff do you do?
So I am surprisingly not nerdy, right? Like, so if you were to know me in regular life, it's hard to even say this. So like in junior high and high school, I was the cool kid, right? Like I literally was part of the popular crowd. I was an athlete. I was, like one of the cool kids, right? And then now in life, and I have always played RPGs. I've played RPGs since I was 12 years old, but I never, I was always comfortable. I was always well-spoken. In other words, like, I am not shy, never been shy. I am the kind of guy who walks into a room where nobody knows, anyone. And I'm the guy that's like, hey, how's it going? Right. Like that's me. Right. So I don't consider myself nerdy at all. So here are my hobbies, right? Like, so my top hobbies: RPGs, 100%. Competitive handgun shooting, right? Like, number 2. And I still play on Hockey League, right? So we get together twice a week. A bunch of us.
You got some chalk points going there. That's good. That's good.
A bunch of us old guys get together and beat each other up. That's like, I don't necessarily think that I'm a nerd. I've never played. I have a theory on this, right? I think power gamers, right? Like, people who are like, oh, my character has to be the strongest person ever. I think those are people who feel weak in real life, right? Like, those are like, so they're sort of making up for that lack, in their life, whatever it is. I'm not even saying that it's there. I'm saying in their own mind, right? Like, they're making up for that lack, through power gaming, this power fantasy that they create. I think a lot of video games have that too, right? Like, I'm not a big video game person. Like, I think a lot of people who play video games, they have that as well. I think that
you don't spend a lot of time playing video games.
I don't spend a lot of time. That's not to say I don't play video games. I will play the occasional video game. I'll be honest with you, most of my time is taken up by work, right? I own my own business, and I have for 12 years now. It's takes up most of my time. I have quite a few clients, people that I have to turn away, right? Like, and so it's not necessarily, I don't have a ton of time to do much other than work and play RPGs, right? Like, I devote a lot of time to RPGs, and that is really more about the people around the table, right? Like, it's more about bonding and hanging out with the people around the table than it is, oh my God, I have to do this, right? Like, it's not living out some sort of power fantasy. It's really more about, it's like golf, right? Like, do you golf? Golf is not necessarily, oh my God, I love the game. Golf is, I like to, have a few beers with my buddies, on the links, right? It's sort of the same thing. Not that my game would ever be considered a beer and pretzels game, right? It's a bit more serious than that, but it is really about, the people that you play with, right? I think that any RPG experience is less about the system and more about the group dynamic, right? And so there have been groups in my life where I have immediately left. It's like a bad relationship, right? As soon as you see the signs, you just, I'm done, right? Like, I'm out. I gotta go. I can't play with this group. Not necessarily because they're bad people, not necessarily because they're doing something that's really wrong, but that you just don't gel, right? And so if you don't gel with that group, it's time to leave. Or if you're running a game and there's a person who's sitting at your table and they don't gel, you got to ask them to leave. And it's not easy, right? Like, it's hard, but I think the reason that I never needed an X card, I never needed a session 0, right? Like, is because you simply, like, if you need an X card, if
you've got the wrong group.
Yeah, you're sitting at the wrong table, my friend. That's silly. That whole concept to me that's insane. That's absolutely insane. But people are a bit more emotionally fragile these days, and they don't, I guess they need an X card. If anyone ever pulled an X card at my table, if any of my group unironically pulled an X card out of my table, I would probably just laugh. I would laugh. I wouldn't even know how to respond. It's so like I don't know. I don't get it. So yeah.
All right. So you made a pretty good argument for yourself. Shooting guns, definitely not a nerd thing. It's tough call between shooting guns and repairing cars. Those are both pretty good.
Yeah.
I've got to give you a few like lightning round questions here, just to make sure that we're being honest here, right? So, do you collect? Do you? Let's start with, do you routinely read comic books?
I do not. And I have never.
I mean, obviously, as a kid, doesn't count, right?
No, even as a child, I have never read. I am not drawn to, nor have I ever been drawn to comic books. No. So.
Okay. Do you watch anime?
No, I don't get anime. The thing is, I have tried. Like, people say, "Oh, you have to watch this anime," right? And I don't get it, right? Like that sort of Japanese and or Korean sensibility I don't get it. It's just
it's funny because I've watched some Korean live action dramas and stuff like that, and some of those are really good actually. But like Japanese anime, it doesn't matter like what the genre. Because people say, "Oh no, but it's not just all giant robots or something like that." But it just doesn't work for me.
Right.
Okay. Do you collect toys of any kind?
I don't even collect Star Wars toys. So there was a time when I was a child, right? When I was younger and then into my teens and into my early 20s, where I did collect Star Wars toys. I no longer collect Star Wars toys. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where that collection is now. That's how important it is to me, right? Like I don't know where that is. So yeah.
All right. Well, do you cosplay?
God, no.
All right, just checking.
No.
Sorry for asking.
I don't cosplay. I don't LARP. I don't. No. I don't do any of those things. You know what my largest collection is? Like, this is gonna sound silly. My largest collection is RPG books and firearms. Right. Like, so I collect antique firearms, as well as more like. I'm kind of a Walter fanboy. So like every sort of handgun that Walter, manufactures, I purchased, but then also older antique, specifically sort of like specifically more the old black powder Western guns, right? Like I have I have an affinity for that. So yeah.
Do you have a buntline special?
I don't have a buntline special. Although I think
that's an incredible story of that gun made specifically for Wyatt Earp, it's remarkable.
So it's an unwieldy gun, right? Like
it is crazy.
It is so long. The barrel on that gun it may as well be a rifle, right? Like, so my preference, I guess if we were to say my manufacturer or my brand would be Colt, right? Like I'm a huge Colt fan, and specifically, right? Like specifically the guns from the Outlaw Josie Wales, right? So like if we think back to sort of, and that's why I'm looking for that Western, right? Like I'm looking for that Western because the Clint Eastwood, Man with No Name sort of series shaped my childhood. I'm Gen X, right? And so that anti-hero, it was the first anti-hero I had ever really encountered. And it was like, oh my God, he's, like this, it was like unlike anything I had ever seen before that particular media. And I'm not saying that Sergio Leone was like some fantastic director by any stretch of the imagination, although he was good. It was just it was the aesthetic and the mood and the theme of that just intrigued me as a child. And I have been a Clint Eastwood fan ever since. and really a gun collector, right? Like, although the gun collecting comes from my father, I came by it naturally, but it definitely the Clint Eastwood obsession helped, right? So for sure.
Yeah. So all right. Well, it sounds you've made a pretty good argument there. You're doing quite well. Now I noticed that Driving and Dragons is trying very hard to defend his title.
Yep.
I think he's pointed out that he also collects guns and has also fought in cage matches. So
he's got me there. I have never fought. He's got me there. I have never fought in a cage match. That is absolutely certain. So apparently he is the least.
I think Driving and Dragons continues to be the reigning champion. However, and you lost a few points because of the Star Wars tattoo, but I think that you are probably second place at this point. So in
fairness, it's not the rebellion. I do have an Empire tattoo, right? Like, so in fairness, that doesn't that
mitigates things a little bit. Yes, a little bit. Yeah, not that much.
Exactly.
But it's not too bad, So, all right. I guess unless someone has some other details for any other questions for our guest, I'll give people another moment to do that if they want to. I'm just looking right now at my Wild West timeline. That Wyatt Earp was a pretty fantastic shot, right? And one of the stories that when he was a deputy marshal at Dodge City, there was this guy named George Hoyt and various other drunken ranch hands belonging to a group called the Cimarron Gang. They started shooting into the Dodge City Comic Theater. Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, and various others shoot at them as they're fleeing. And all the other guys stopped shooting because they'd gotten too far away, and they'd gotten. It was, I don't know how many yards. I didn't put it down there, but it was a really long distance. These guys only had pistols, right? But then Earp, he keeps pointing and he ends up shooting George Hoyt in the leg and dropping him into the Arkansas River as they were crossing it. And everybody was like shocked by how incredible, because pistols, especially back then, like the range, longer ranges, was really hard to hit someone, and he dropped this guy from black
powder. Black powder is not as effective as today's firearms, for sure.
So that's just one of the stories that you'll get in the Wild West timeline.
I will absolutely check it out. So you didn't paint Wyatt Earp though as the good guy, right? Because Wyatt Earp was not.
All the details there are historical. I mean, the first entry you see in the Wild West timeline about Wyatt Earp is about how him and his brothers were working as bouncers in a poorhouse. They were basically imps. Yeah.
And
no. I tell all the good and the bad, right? There's nothing. This isn't a black hat, white hat Hollywood version. This is the actual historical facts.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess that's everything for today. Wait a minute. What was Judd's question? Judd, what was your question? I'm sorry if we missed it. I see you're still here, so if you want to bring it back up. I guess we missed it in the debating. Assuming he's still here. He was here a moment ago. Driving to Drive says, yeah, the last big thing Earp did was rig a boxing. Well, I would argue that the last big thing he did was actually to work as an advisor on the early Wild West movies, because that essentially changed his entire destiny. Because all the earliest, including John Wayne, right? All of the early Wild West actors met him and idolized him. Of course, he gave a very florid version of his escapades, right? And so he became the great white hat hero of the Wild West films in the early days, right? So that saved his whole reputation, because he, as you point out correctly, he had a really terrible reputation before that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Judd Goswick says, what is coming up for the Rollstats channel?
Okay, so essentially I am working my way, and this is the list that you were referring to earlier, but I'm working my way through Dungeon Magazine's top 30 D&D adventures, and whether they actually belong on the list. So what I did was a rundown of all 30 that are on there, and then I will do deep dives of each of the 30 and what I really think of them. You know, some of them really belong there. Some of them are fantastic. Some of them, I'm not sure how they made it on the list, specifically, you know, over other modules, but we'll, you know, we're gonna talk about it and discuss it. So if you're interested in my thoughts on the top 30, or if you haven't played through, you know, all of the 30 in the top 30 on Dungeon Magazine, certainly, you know, come by and check it out and see if you agree with me. And if you don't, you know, you can always tell me in the comments that, you know, I'm an idiot and I'm wrong because of whatever. Or if you do agree, you know, let me know. So for sure.
Oh yeah, I saw in your video that you said you were going to go one by one on these.
Yep.
These modules.
Yeah, but you know,
I thought, curiously for you, that video, I was waiting to see if there was going to be like any of those adventures that you were going to say, you know what, this wasn't really that great, you know, and you didn't really do that.
No, but the deep dive.
The deep dive, you're going to point out what are some of the strengths and weaknesses, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Because in that video, like, I mean, that video was over an hour long, you know, as it was. All I could give was a couple sentences on each, right? So,
sure, of course. That's understandable. Yeah. So, all right. So that's what you guys have for the future there. Adino asks if you do live streams.
I don't. This is it. Like, if I get asked back,
first live stream you've ever done. Look at that.
Yeah, right. If I get asked back for, you know, on Pundit Encounters, then you'll have a live stream. Other than that, I don't generally do live streams because there's not really that much, like, you know, I can do a live stream around a review, but you know, I don't know. Is that compelling? You tell me. If you want me to do live streams, I'll start doing live streams. We can live review products. You know, but other than that, no, I don't generally do live streams.
All right. So, well, I'm sure that at some point I might invite you back, but because I only do one encounter show every 4 weeks, it's going to take a while because, of course, there's a lot of people that I want to have on here. And speaking of that, the next show should be, unless anything changes, on the 1st of June. That's 4 weeks from now. And I guess I could say that as of the moment, the guest star is going to be a former member of Inappropriate Characters. So you're going to have a mini reunion there, assuming that the schedule permits and everything works out. So be sure to check back with us then. And meanwhile, you should be sure to check out the other episodes of the RPGPundit Encounter if you haven't watched them yet, and check out the rest of my channel. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and check out all of my various products that are always in the links to, or the description of my videos. I'm sure you're going to find a lot of good games there that you'll find interesting, or in my, Pundit Files series. And I hope everybody enjoyed this and had a good time. And we will see you guys in 4 weeks. Thank you very much for coming, Rollstats. And I'm sure I already know from the chat that you've gotten at least a few subs from this. So I hope that'll help keep growing your channel.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's truly been a pleasure. So
my pleasure. Oh, and currently smoking, or rather just finished smoking, Ben Wade Rhodesian plus Argento Latakia. All right. And that is it for today.
All right.